Hello everyone and welcome back to The Lion's Den. I'm your host Matt as always, and this is Skyward Sword week. I've completed the game. I've had time to kind of chew the fat, process what I've done, and now I'm going to tell you everything that I've thought of in terms of the game. I'm not going to talk about spoilers, but if I do, I'm going to scream and say, "This is a spoiler," before I start saying anything, so bear that in mind. But I think the main thing is I want to talk about the controls. The controls are a huge point of contention in Skyward Sword, especially the original, because they were motion controls. Motion controls on the Wii are not that great, really, and the whole game was built around the motion controls. So it works to some extent, but obviously the Wii is the Wii, so we all remember that tech demo and how it just didn't work correctly, but hey ho. So the controls take getting used to, regardless of whether you pick motion controls or whether you decide to pick the button controls. Both take time getting used to. I started out with the motion controls because I thought, it's the Switch, right? The Joy-Cons are hopefully infinitely better in terms of their technology and their motion control capabilities, so I'll use them. Also bear in mind I'm doing an on-location recording again, so sorry about any of the wind or the road noise. Can't be avoided. So, I started out with the motion controls, and to be honest, they're really nice. They work really well. The accuracy you have with swinging the right Joy-Con around as your sword is on point, honestly. But that's about where the good parts of it end. Aiming with the motion controls for the items is honestly a pain, because the gyroscope in the Joy-Cons must be super sensitive, and whenever I was pointing around and trying to aim, the reticle would kind of like jitter a lot, so my accuracy was thrown off. The next part as well is trying to do precise motions at the correct time is not good. So, for context, a lot of enemies will try and force you to strike them in a specific motion. It might be vertically, it might be horizontally, it might be in a diagonal, or it might only be a certain direction, like you can only hit them right, or you can only hit them downwards, for example. And the problem is, it takes your brain a moment to process that, and then do the appropriate motion. But if you wait too long, the enemies will change which way they're trying to do. So for example, let's say they want you to do a vertical strike. You process that, start to move to do the motion, but by that point, they've then moved to block vertically and want you to hit them horizontally. So you end up clanging with them, and then they can hit you back and you get hurt. That is my biggest gripe with the controls. And the problem is the game kind of wants you to play slowly and strategically, right? It wants you to think about which way you swiping your sword to try and hit the enemy. But then it turns out that the best strategy is just wail on them. Just go absolutely ballistic. Wave the sword as fast as possible in as many directions as possible, because you'll put them in hit stun, and then you can get multiple attacks in one go. And it's like, the whole combat point is just moot at that point. Essentially, I was very frustrated in the very beginning of the game with both sets and controls, because they're not at all ideal. But after maybe 5 to 10 hours of using one or the other, I got used to it. And I think that's the thing, is people don't like it initially because it's really clunky and awkward, but once you understand the limitations of the system and the limitations of what you can do, it works surprisingly well. I will say though, button controls are infinitely better, and that's because it comes back to that point of you can wail on them. You can flick the right the right analog stick with your thumb so quickly to do multiple different motions, because it's a tiny little stick, as opposed to having to do a big sweeping motion with the Joy-Con. So it becomes a lot better, honestly, in that regard. But the only slight downside with the button controls is, because the right analog stick is mapped to the sword, the now new free camera doesn't work quite how you want it to. You have to press down the left bumper, or just L on a Switch controller, and then you can use the right stick to move the camera freely. So you can't ever pick the camera or the sword at the same time. So that's kind of an idea of the controls. Oh, on the button controls as well, there are a few notable things that are better than using the motion controls. So for example, certain items require piloting, moving them around. Now in the motion controls, the right Joy-Con simulates whatever it is you're controlling. So you kind of tilt it around and use that to maneuver the item. And the biggest thing as well is, when you're riding the Loftwing in the sky, you use the right Joy-Con as if it is the bird and you're controlling it. That's horrible. It's awful. Trust me. It works, but it's not fun. Whereas in the button controls, you just use the left stick and buttons to do certain actions. Much better. This then leads on to my gripe with Skyward Sword, which is how it handles difficulty increase. So in Zelda games, generally they'll give you harder enemies that have different attack patterns and maybe more health, or they damage you more, so it makes you slightly more cautious. The way Skyward Sword handles this is it just throws more enemies at you. So for example, the Bokoblins, which are the base enemy of the game, generally will throw 1, maybe 2 at a time at you. Towards the late game, it just throws like 4 or 5 at one go, and the problem is, your sword kind of will clip through the enemies. That's how the sort of how it works, it seems. So what this means is you'll be attacking one of them, for example, and it will want a horizontal strike. So you'll do it, but the second one behind them will be wanting a vertical strike, so it'll be blocking. So you'll pass through the first one, hitting them, but then go straight into hits them because you've attacked the second one in the wrong direction. And that means that the first one, which is now recovered from your attack, can just hit you, which is really stupid because you can't do anything. If you incorrectly hit the second one when you're trying to hit the first one, you then get put in hit stun, so the first one can then hit you. It's really dumb. And if there's multiple of them, oh, good lord, it doesn't matter. You can be fighting one of them correctly, but you'll be fighting the other 3 incorrectly, so therefore you'll get hurt. And they don't wait like they do in previous Zelda games. So in previous Zelda games, they had the idea where if there's multiple enemies in a room and you're fighting them, only one tends to attack at a time. But in Skyward Sword, that doesn't seem to be the thing. It seems like they will just kind of attack you whenever they want, which is really, really annoying. And especially late game, when they put you on very skinny bridges with big enemies that require slow, methodical hitting, in correct patterns, and then they just put like 3 of them on a small skinny bridge. It's really annoying, and it's not fun. But that would be my only gripe, and that's the thing that I come back to. That again is it doesn't work because you can just kind of wail instead. You just flick the stick as fast as possible, and eventually enough hits get through that you kill them. And that's not how it was designed to be played, if that makes sense. I'm really struggling to convey this without just saying like, here's how it goes without breaking the story and stuff. Right, next thing is the sky. The sky is completely pointless, I'm perfectly honest. In Skyward Sword, your main point of going from between the hub area of Skyloft to the rest of the game is the sky. You fly around on your Loftwing, you go to a couple small islands, and then you proceed to portals to travel to the main areas of the game. This is pointless because there's nothing in it. Unlike, for example, Wind Waker with the Great Ocean, it had many notable islands that you could go to and do something on, and had people and rewards and things. The sky doesn't. It has like small islands, and there's maybe 3 islands that are actually like an enclosed little bubble of stuff to see and do. The rest of it is just open space, and it's not fun. It's just time wasting. It's really novel to begin with because you think, oh my gosh, I have a bird, I can fly around, this is really cool. But it gets boring so fast, so quickly. And I wish it just wasn't. I wish there was more in it to do than there currently is, but that's just the way they did it. Right, my final gripe with the game is the lack of teaching you how to do things. So generally in Zelda games, they'll give you an item, and then you'll be expected to figure out a quirk of how the item works to progress and solve puzzles. Now generally what they do is they'll set up a room in such a way that it's kind of not obvious what you can do, but if you work your way logically through that puzzle, you'll eventually go, oh, I can do this with bombs, or oh, I can do this with arrows, for example. Skyward Sword doesn't really do that, and it's really frustrating because you'll be in a room knowing exactly what you're trying to achieve, but not how to achieve it. And multiple times I had to actually look up a walkthrough of how to solve a puzzle because I just couldn't figure out how to do it. And I've played a fair few Zeldas and never had this issue, but Skyward Sword, it's the first time I've had this issue, and it's really weird because a lot of people complained that the game did a lot of hand-holding, which they did somewhat fix in the remake. They kind of toned down how obtrusive Fi or Fee or whatever you want to call her, how obtrusive she is. But clearly what she would say was not relevant, because whenever I then got really stuck and thought, right, I'll ask Fee or Fi to see what she says, she didn't then help. She just kind of said something really generic that was not at all useful. And I was just kind of like, this is fantastic, love, but really I need more assistance. So, despite all of that, I don't want you to get the idea that I didn't like it. Skyward Sword is great. Honestly, it is my, I think, second or third top Zelda. That's how good Skyward Sword is to me personally. And I put Breath of the Wild at number 1, so you can kind of see where I'm going here. The story is really nice, although there are a few plot points that I kind of think are stupid, but that's by the by. The concepts and the ideas of some of the dungeons are beautiful. The way the game looks in HD is just gorgeous, and I think that helps because of how they did the art style. The combat works nicely when you get used to it, and the button controls I think certainly help the issues that people had with the motion controls. Again, I'm trying not to spoil plot points. It's good. It's very good. I enjoyed it. I think that's the biggest thing, is despite the fact that I had some screaming moments where I was infuriated with the game just being the game, I still came away from it like, I really love this. This is really good. I'm really happy. I really enjoyed it. So I 100% recommend, if you're into Zelda, pick it up. But I do recommend firstly starting with button controls, and secondly just stick with it. It's going to be really weird and really clunky to begin with, but it will pan out how you want it to. So cool. This is going to be a bit of a longer episode. Yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to talk about. So thank you very much for listening. Buy Skyward Sword. Simple as. It's worth the money. And I mean, I got it for under 40 quid because they had like some promotional deal where if you pre-ordered it, you got like 10% off or something. So yeah. Anyway, thank you all for listening, if indeed you still are. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.